So hey guys, welcome back to my channel. What if Naruto was the evil and merciless imposter of Konoha? Movie. How the hell do I get myself into these kinds of things? This was the thought running through Naruto's head. Well, at least it would been if Naruto had been thinking anything even remotely resembling a coherent thought at the moment. As it was, the blonde was fighting for his life amongst a horde of creatures. Swords, clubs and spears. Arrows, rocks, and fire. The creatures were throwing everything they had at the young ninja, and while Naruto was doing well, slaying at least 10 for every blow they landed, there was a lot of the blasted things. Even by the standards of spam shadow clones Uzumaki, Naruto was heavily outnumbered. He could been killing 20 of them for every hit they got in, but it still wouldn't have been enough. It had started out innocently enough, for Naruto at least. All Head wanted to do was try out those sealing techniques that Iro Sennin's had started to teach him by making his own, new summoning contract. Naruto had purchased a blank scroll while Jiraiya was off peeping and tried to write up his own scroll. It hadn't exactly gone as planned. Had written up the contract pretty good as far as he could tell, his summons would be his minions and would have to do his bidding, and all He'd have to do was command them and use some chakra to summon them. There wouldn't be nothing like what happened with Gamabunta with these guys. Now, Jiraiya hadn't taught Naruto a whole lot by this point. They were only 2 months into their 3-year training trip and they'd started working on sealing only a week ago. And Naruto was well Naruto. The blonde had signed the contract and without really thinking much at all, had tried to make it work. Needless to say, if he got out of this alive, he wasn't going to try that shit again. If being the operative word in this case. Had signed in blood, had done the hand signs, had bit his thumb, had molded the chakra, but something had just been wrong. And yet had still slapped his hand to the ground. He berated himself for that, had just assumed it was different because it was his contract instead of Iro Sennin's, and that if it was wrong, that he could just make it work by sheer force of will. The puff of smoke had been larger than normal, making it impossible to see his surroundings. When it cleared, Head found himself in a massive arena, a dome of stone over his head instead of sky, high walls lining the oval of dirt and separating him from the stands. There'd been a single one of those small creatures dusting the floor that had appeared right beside. It barely stood as high as Naruto's shoulders, all scraggly muscle and leathery skin, bald head with giant ears and eerie yellow eyes. Naruto, being the future Hokage, greatest ninja alive, and just generally awesome in every way, had assessed the situation properly. After the brief scream like a girl in fear and point stupidly at the thing phase of course. That was just procedure. In Naruto's defense, the creature had done the exact same thing, and moments later, when many more of the creatures had flooded into the arena, Naruto had reacted beautifully. Had thrown the first thing into the oncoming horde of others and created a slew of shadow clones as he got some distance. The problem was that things had degenerated into a constant lethal brawl after that, and Naruto had yet to find a way to change the situation. Had gone up the walls, but the creatures had poured out of the doors to the stands and Naruto couldn't get through. Had tried going through the main gates that most of the things were coming out of, only to be swarmed or pushed back by a veritable wall of fireballs. He hardly had any breathing room in the fight at all. Almost all the available space was taken up by the little creatures or his own clones. Naruto could barely get the time and space to summon more shadow clones, let alone use any of his better moves. And he was running out of everything. Kunai, shuriken, wire, explosive tags, even his otherwise inexhaustible reserves of stamina were dwindling under the constant pressure of battle. Things were not looking good. At least from his perspective. From someone else's, things were looking better every second. Specifically, the oldest of the creatures that Naruto was slaughtering by the dozens. The wizened old grey creature known as Gnarl. Gnarl was watching the brawl magically to avoid getting dragged into the fight accidentally, and he could barely contain his evil glee. Their old master, while gleefully despicable in almost every way without overindulging in a particular sin or cruelty, had been quite adamant about not extending his life through what he called unnatural means. Well, had died of old age. Fancy that, and a party of heroes had tried to take the now masterless netherworld by storm. While the heavily fortified minions had fought the heroes off, they had not been able to before some of the spellstones, artifacts, and trophies had been stolen. This had saddened Gnarl, but evil always found a way. The minions had done their best to keep the netherworld in tip-top shape, ready for the next overlord, and keeping away those pesky heroes and pretenders for the title. And now, suddenly, it seemed evil, note the capital letter, minions didn't believe in fate, they believed in capital letter evil, had sent the minions a new overlord. The kid was still young, so he could still be potentially molded into a new evil overlord, but he showed so much potential. He was holding his own against most of the minions in the main spire. And it wasn't by himself, he was using an army of himself. It was amazing. Gnarl had never seen magic like this. And the boy was at least as fast as most of the minions and seemed amazingly creative and quick-witted as far as the ancient minion could tell. Yes, this boy could be the new overlord. A new kind of overlord even. Not one of those slow and ponderous behemoths swinging around a massive hammer as he stood in heavy armor. No. He could be quick. He could dart around the battlefield with a lethal blade, stabbing his enemies in the back like a better-smelling green. Coordinating with his minions, using them to force his enemies to him, where he would throw his own army of himself at them. He could use more battlefield tactics than any overlord before him. Gnarl couldn't decide whether he was going to drool at the thought of so much potential evil or cry in sadistic joy. But the wizened minion was pragmatic over everything else, except evil of course. He had to see if this boy was true overlord material or just some henchman in an overlord's disguise, or worse a hero. Gnarl shuddered at the thought. Thankfully, it looked like the boy was starting to tire after the 4th hour of brawling and copying himself no less. The blonde boy had pulled back behind a circle of copies, breathing heavily. Gnarl held up a claw and the tide of minions paused, sensing the command, even if they couldn't see it. Gnarl shuffled down the stairs and hallway with surprising speed, the sea of minions parting before him as he shuffled across the blood-stained dirt of the arena. He came to a stop several feet from the circle of orange-clad blondes, pleasantly surprised that the original seemed to have his breathing almost entirely under control already. Naruto stared at the creature that had separated itself from the sea of the others. Most of them fell into one of 4 categories: brown surprisingly strong for their size bastards, green smells like ass and are kinda ninja bastards, red bud ugly fire-throwing bastards, and blue scaly heel the ones had already killed bastards. This one was different. This one was now grey with a stupid lamthingy bastard. At least in Naruto's mind that's what they were. Head shortened the names when he insulted them to their faces. The weight was getting unbearable on Naruto's end. When Head fallen back behind his clones to catch his breath, Head expected the sea of creatures to swarm him, not just stop. It'd been a really tense minute before the grey bastard had shown up. Naruto had briefly considered shouting out at the thing, since it seemed to be the leader, but Head reined in the impulse. If this had kept up much longer, Head have had to draw on the Kyuubi's chakra, and he really didn't want to do that. So, antagonizing this guy might not be a good idea. Naruto waited, despite his normal energy, he was a ninja. He could wait, he just really hated it. The waiting was usually worse than the actual action, so why bother waiting were his thoughts on the matter. The waiting was hell. The grey bastard's arrival had put the tension on pause, but now things were getting worse. The urge to break the silence and just get it over with was building. It was quickly becoming hard for the blonde to resist. So, after almost 2 minutes of thunderous silence, Naruto gave in to the temptation. "The hell you lookin' at, shorty?" Surprisingly, the grey bastard smiled. It was kinda creepy. "Why, I'm looking at someone who really shouldn't be here." Naruto snorted. "Well, 'scuse me, it's not like I meant to come to your smelly little hole." The thing looked confused for a second before beaming at Naruto, and that was really creepy, really. "How did you get here then? It should be impossible to just teleport in." Naruto, while perfectly capable of keeping his furry prisoner a secret, still had a number of issues with keeping things that he didn't think would make people hate him secret. "I tried to make a summoning contract, didn't work out like I expected is all." "Summoning contract? Yeah, tried to get me some proper subordinates instead of frogs. I mean, frogs are nice and all, but they don't always listen, and I can never get the size I want." The grey bastard nodded thoughtfully and, unbeknownst to Naruto, was cackling on the inside. It was too perfect. They'd dropped a potential overlord right into his lap. "Well, it seems like this contract of yours might worked. We've been looking for a new master for some time now. Then why the hell do you attack me to Bayo?" The grey bastard coughed awkwardly. "Well, you surprised us, and we've been doing our best to keep the unworthy out. Think of it as a test if you will, to see if you were worth our time." Naruto blinked. "Seriously?" "Yes," the thing nodded. "You show plenty of potential, and while it wasn't the usual test, it certainly was enough of a trial to count." Naruto didn't know it, but he was about to get bullshitted quite thoroughly. "But we still have the interview to do, so if y'all would be kind enough to disperse these copies." The thing waved at the shadow clones. Now, Naruto was trusting and a little naive, but he wasn't that stupid. "Only if you get the rest of these things out of here." The thing nodded and waved a hand dismissively. The things then scampered out of the arena, some hitting, tripping, or otherwise hurting their companions as they left. All in all, it was like a giant comedy routine, but they still left just the grey one and Naruto alone. Then Naruto dispelled his clones. Naruto dropped to the dirt floor, doing his best to get comfortable as Gnarl waddled over and did similar. "You seriously considering me to be your new boss?" "Of course. You passed the first test, didn't you?" Gnarl was starting to get an idea on how to manipulate this kid, just the barest beginnings, but he'd see how it worked. "But we still have to do the interview to be sure. Now, what's your name?" Honestly, the kid was too trusting, but that could be fixed. Really, he had a bunch of problems, but everyone could be fixed with a little effort. Gnarl had almost cried tears of evil joy when Head discovered that the boy's goal was to be this Hokage thing, which sounded suspiciously like kinda nice overlord with ninja. Desire for power was good, and it seemed to be an overriding goal to the boy, Naruto. It seemed the boy had had a rough life, even by Overlord standards. The cheerfulness was a mask more complete than almost any that Gnarl had seen, and the boy latched onto anyone that showed him the slightest kindness. It made him all the easier to manipulate. Gnarl had barely had to tell him anything aside from his name, that Naruto might be taking command of the minions in the netherworld, that he might learn magic if he was accepted, and that the minions weren't exactly good guys. Sadly, he seemed to have a fixation on protecting his friends, and Gnarl had dealt with enough overlords and their fixations to know one when he saw it. The boy would always be all nice and goody-goody to his friends, no matter what Gnarl tried to do. But the old minion just might be able to get the blonde to make a distinction between peasants, subordinates, henchmen, and friends. With some luck of course. But there was something the blonde wasn't telling him. Gnarl was listening to the boy rant about some Sasuke team as he tried to puzzle it out. Even though the boy himself was abhorrently cheerful, there was a layer of despair beneath that, something Gnarl planned to capitalize on to speed the boy's descent to darkness. Yet ever since Gnarl had entered the arena, had felt this unsettling tingle in the pit of his stomach, the kind of feeling you get when you eat a particularly resilient beetle whole and it keeps crawling around for a while. Or you found yourself near a source of great evil, note the capitalization in bold letters. Now, evil might refer to what the minions considered fate or a powerful and efficient overlord. Evil usually referred to a particularly mighty and/or vile overlord. Evil only referred to creatures and beings whose speech could only be properly represented by all bold letters, all caps optional, like dark gods, vampiric dragons, one specific overlord who was so powerful that he took over the abyss over the dead body of one of the aforementioned dark gods, particularly nasty rock giants, and demon gods. So why in the abyss was Gnarl getting that feeling from such a nice, something Gnarl intended to fix, kid? Then Sasuke team stabbed me with Chidori, so I really had to cut loose. That got Gnarl's attention, so he interrupted the boy, wait, didn't you say that this Chidori thing was a spear of lightning? That hadn't been exactly what the boy had said, but it was close enough. How'd the boy survive that? Well yeah. Then how did you survive? Well, Naruto was ready to panic, he knew what had done, but he really didn't want to tell Gnarl about that. Gnarl noticed the panic rising in the boy, well, that won't do. No keeping secrets from him, at least not yet, so, time to manipulate a bit, it's a secret isn't it? Why yeah, a big one. Well, I'm sorry, but the minions couldn't accept you unless you told us, but Gnarl made a show of darting his eyes back and forth. Naruto noticed, but what? Well, I'm not supposed to tell applicants this, but there's nothing left that could keep you out of the position, except for keeping such a big secret from us. Naruto bit his lip and looked away, rubbing the back of his neck with a hand. Would it be worth it to tell them? Would they hate him for it? Would they treat him like almost every person in Konohagakure? Gnarl saw the emotions play across the boy's face and was about to give it another push just to be sure when Naruto spoke up, promise not to hate me. His voice was so soft and terrified that Gnarl had to swallow the bile rising in his throat, reminding himself that the kid showed too much potential to just be tossed aside, and this was likely what made Naruto so easy to manipulate in the first place. So, swallowing his instinctive reaction, Gnarl feigned kindness and sympathy, I promise Naruto, there isn't anything you could say that would make me hate you. Man, that was a load of bull, but apparently the boy bought it. You remember when I told you about the fourth Hokage? You said he sacrificed himself to save your village, right? Again Gnarl forced down his instinctive revulsion, a hero. Yeah, he sacrificed himself to save Konoha from the Kyuubi. Now that Naruto was started, he couldn't stop, but even though they say he killed the Kyuubi, he didn't. He couldn't. He had to seal it away, and he sealed it away into a kid. The newborn kid Naruto grabbed the bottom of his jacket and shirt, lifting them up to reveal his stomach as he molded some chakra, making the seal on his stomach show, I contain the Kyuubi no Kitsune. Naruto waited, eyes scrunched closed and fully prepared for the disgust, the fear, the rage. He expected Gnarl to hate him like all the others, to say he wasn't worthy of leading the minions, to kick him out. But it didn't come. Naruto carefully cracked open an eye to find the strange creature beaming at him, tears running out of its eyes. Gnarl opened his arms to the blonde, welcome home sire. Gnarl didn't realize it, but in that single emotional gesture, he had earned Naruto's undying loyalty. The aged minion had taken a second to process the information. The boy that had fallen into their lap, the same one that showed so much overlord potential, had the 9 tails, the 9-tailed demon fox, a demon god for evil's sake. Sealed in his stomach. And unless Gnarl missed his mark, that seal on the boy's stomach was modified old magic, the kind that would let him draw on the demon's power. That meant Naruto had an effectively infinite source of both mana and that chakra stuff. Fast, agile, able to clone himself, and infinite power. This kid was the perfect overlord. So it was with tears of evil joy that Gnarl had, quite literally, welcomed Naruto with open arms to the evil family. So if I wear this stuff, it'll be faster and stronger when I'm not. Yes, sire, but do please remember that you don't have to speak aloud to communicate with me. We don't want people thinking you're crazy and talking to yourself now, do we? Yeah, oh, I mean Naruto paused, focusing his thoughts through his slightly modified headband. Yeah, I get it. Gnarl had figured out how to send him back, it hadn't really been all that hard really, just do the summoning jutsu a second time. Had just made sure that the runes that normally let him communicate with his overlord were inscribed on the inside of Naruto's headband before sending him back. It seemed that Naruto could use the jutsu to either summon minions or summon himself into the netherworld. It just depended on how he did it. In the week since Naruto had began his overlord training, Gnarl had gotten him to summon about 20 minions to his world. Gnarl had determined that it was a parallel world, much like the Abyss, only with less evil, and Gnarl had been using the minions to steal books and spy on this new world. He couldn't very well advise an overlord if he didn't know what he was talking about now, could he? Giblet had just finished the burnt orange bracers and shin guards that the blonde ninja overlord was now wearing over his new, slightly larger black jumpsuit. Gnarl didn't really mind the orange, as long as it wasn't neon orange. Had gotten Giblet to weight down the master's armor for now, with Naruto's teach nearby much of the time, there was little chance he would be in enough danger to need to remove them. So he had plenty of time to build his muscles. Now sire, let's run through the fighting stances on that scroll one more time. So you're completely sure I shouldn't tell Hirosenin? Yes sire, I'm sure, he might get jealous of someone else teaching you and stop giving you the teaching that he does. That and Gnarl had a sneaking suspicion that the white-haired pervert wouldn't take too kindly to Gnarl trying to turn the boy to evil. Sire, have you never heard of tact? Gnarl stared stupidly through the magical link as his new overlord, for lack of better words, made an ass of himself. Calling a small-time noblewoman fat to her face was usually a one-way ticket to an execution. The only reason it hadn't been was that Jiraiya had stepped up and instantly made an even bigger ass of himself and sent Naruto out. Jiraiya could get away with stuff like that, Naruto couldn't. Tact? What's that? Gnarl briefly considered the thought that Naruto was joking, then discarded it. It was a sadly honest question. I mean, could you try to be more subtle, sire? Well, stuff like that may be true, and it was. The woman was larger than a small barn, saying it like that isn't the best thing sometimes. I don't like lying to people's faces, why not just come out and say it? An idea passed through Gnarl's mind, a true Hokage needs to be subtle, sire. Really? Why? By evil, it worked. Well sire, pretend for a moment that you're Hokage and that two different villages have declared war on you. Now, if you fought them both at the same time, many of your friends, Gnarl was still getting used to using that as bait for the boy, would die in the war. Naruto had to suppress a growl at that thought. But, if you were subtle and tricked them into fighting each other, you could destroy the winner while they were weakened, and the chances of your friends dying would drop significantly. Gnarl paused for dramatic effect before he added the kicker, and while you are quite good at making blunt and in-your-face likable, more people would be your friends if you had a bit of tact. So Gnarl, how do I be subtle? Naruto couldn't stop grinning. The bandits they'd been hired to catch had been caught. Naruto and Jiraiya had been paid double. The farmers and merchants had promised discounts for life to Naruto, and a good chunk of the bandits had actually been absorbed into the nobleman's guard. And the blonde hadn't even had to throw a single punch. It'd just taken a couple transformations and some talking. Gnarl had walked him through the manipulation of all the parties involved, explaining why Naruto was saying and doing what he was. Naruto didn't think he'd be able to do something like that on his own just yet, but with Gnarl's help, had learned how. Man, this thing is pretty heavy. That's the point, sire, until a sword worthy of a Hokage is finished, you should practice with this weighted one. I know, it'll help me be faster and stronger and stuff. I'm just surprised it's this heavy. Naruto stood in the center of the clearing, had told Jiraiya that he was going out here to practice his chakra control and stuff, which he was, but he was mostly here to work with his new sword. It was essentially a really big katana, almost as long as he was tall, being larger than average in every respect except for the hilt, which was custom made for Naruto. Naruto gave the blade a swing. It was hard to do so with what minuscule skill he had, and even with his greater than average strength, it was hard to swing the sword and not heave it around. Hey, Gnarl, you sure this thing is made right? Naruto trusted Gnarl implicitly, but he didn't know Giblet, the Forge Master minion, very well. I'm almost positive, sire, Giblet learns quite fast for a minion. That sword wouldn't do in an actual fight, but we're quite certain that it's balanced exactly like similarly sized weapons in your world. Naruto gripped the hilt with both hands, examining the blade in his hands. It was made of a polished lead, and Giblet had done something to keep it from glinting in the light. From edge to back, it was almost as wide as his palm, and almost as thick from side to side as 2 fingers, the blade even curved slightly towards the end. The hilt was specially designed and molded for Naruto and the blade, making it comfortable to use with either one hand or two. Now, Naruto might not be a swordsmith or anything, but he knew that took skill. Sire? Yes, Gnarl. We should start training, sire. Nah, you're right Gnarl. Naruto pulled a leaf out of his pocket, setting the thing over his headband and using his chakra to hold the thing in place. Hey, Head told Jiraiya he was going to practice his chakra control and other stuff, he just hadn't said what the other stuff was. The blonde still didn't like lying, but Head learned that to be subtle like a good Hokage should be, he sometimes had to bend the truth a bit or leave out certain bits of information. He usually did that by talking loudly and energetically about something else, which was what Head done before when he was uncomfortable, to draw people's attention away from what he didn't want to talk about. He just hadn't done it consciously. Now he knew what he was doing. So, he hadn't lied to Jiraiya earlier, Head just told him what he wanted to hear. Walking on water while floating a leaf over your forehead was working on chakra control, so what if he was slowly learning how to use a sword at the same time? Naruto had expected this to happen, just not this soon. Jiraiya was one of the legendary Sannin, regardless of how he acted or goofed around, the guy was an amazing ninja when he put his mind to it. Naruto had always had an inkling that Jiraiya wasn't just enjoying women when he went to the red light districts. Even if had only recently confirmed it. Still, Naruto had expected it to take a bit longer before Jiraiya confronted him about all his new things. That explained away the outfit change and bits of armor as what they were, a conscious decision to be a serious ninja and take his training more seriously. Had gotten the black jumpsuit, burnt orange forearm bracers and shin guards, both of which were really training weights that just doubled his armor, on his own money. Naruto had also been able to explain away the sizable sword that had gotten 2 weeks ago, saying he wanted to learn how to use one and had gotten himself one by emptying out Gama-chan. Jiraiya had let it pass then, but when the old hermit had discovered Naruto running through a reasonably advanced kata on his own, it hadn't been long before he confronted the blonde. Naruto somehow the perverted old man was able to growl Naruto's name in a way that was particularly menacing. It was actually kinda scary with a large man standing over him while he was tied into a chair and completely stripped of his weapons. Still, Naruto had faced down Orochimaru, and that was one freaky son of a bitch. The hell's this for Tobeo? Naruto knew exactly what this was about, but Jiraiya didn't expect him to, so, had play along. Where did you get sword training Naruto? Yeah, thought it was that the blonde made a show of huffing and looking to the side, I didn't get no sword training. The older man scowled, the look on his face easily conveying his displeasure. Naruto huffed again, the plan Gnarl had come up with was to play the whole, you never train me, so I'm going to train myself card, which was mostly true, while implying I'm a stupid kid that doesn't know any better. If you don't guide me I'll learn horrible forbidden techniques on my own. Which was only kinda true. What do you care? You don't train me I gotta figure stuff out on my own. Jiraiya's face softened a bit, but he held onto his serious look and didn't fall back to his perverted idiot mask. Look, Naruto, you didn't just make that up, I know, I can tell. That was the beginnings of Cage Rick, not a kid flailing around with a sword. The older man paused before he continued in a gruff voice, I'm just worried about you kid, I don't want you learning anything too dangerous. Hook, line, and sinker. Naruto pouted some, but relented, I learned it from a book I stole. Technically, summons were considered a part of the ninja that summoned them. So, since his summoned minions had stolen the scrolls and books on Cage Rick, Naruto was just really stretching the truth. Naruto but said blonde wasn't done. If you just trained me more I won't have to do this stuff. He exploded at his teacher, you barely teach me anything. The only teacher worse than you that I've had is Kakashi-sensei. Naruto huffed and looked away, grumbling the last part under his breath and knowing Jiraiya would hear it, bet even Orochimaru would have been a better teacher. Playing the poor pitiful kid was Gnarl's idea, implying that he was considering joining Orochimaru because he didn't feel loved was something Naruto came up with on the spot. And boy did it work. Alright, what have you been working on? Naruto settled more comfortably on his log as he thought about that, mostly on my taijutsu, kinjutsu, and chakra control. Every time I improve my chakra control, everything else becomes easier, so I think I should improve that before I learn any more jutsu. It just make learning new things easier. He seriously thought about the question for another moment before continuing, but I've been trying to use what sealing you taught me to improve my equipment and stuff and, well I don't know enough. He looked up at the white-haired pervert as pitifully as he could manage. Jiraiya did his best to hold back the wince, well that did somewhat contradict what he had planned for Naruto in the beginning, the kid's logic was sound. So what really was the harm in teaching the kid some seals in his off time? Okay, what do you remember from last time? Gnarl sat in the growing library in the master's quarters and just stared. Even though he just knew, that none of the 4 blondes in front of him were the original, it was almost impossible to tell the difference. The only difference Gnarl could find was that none of them triggered Gnarl's very finely tuned evil senses. Gnarl had always been smarter and more sensitive to magical energies than any other minion, he wouldn't have lived long enough to get his position if he didn't. But in all his centuries as minion master, he had never seen someone with as much potential as Naruto. They had only recently discovered that the boy's clones could learn for him, and Gnarl had immediately set several of them out to studying through the Netherworld's library, even as the original was in his world doing whatever he needed to do. One of the blondes spoke up, "Hey, Gnarl, why are you having us study history? Sire, I've already explained this once." "Yeah, but I want to be sure I get it." Gnarl was happy that had broken the boy of the habit of not asking when he didn't understand what a teacher was saying, but that didn't make it any less annoying to have to say the same thing 3 times when he was certain Naruto had learned it by the second. "Sire, people in power have made major mistakes in the past, and they've made brilliant decisions. But we can't train you how to make the better decisions, except by studying history. The dates and names aren't that important, but what they did in their situations is. So if I read about history and stuff, I'll learn from their mistakes." "Yes, sire, that is exactly it. By studying history, you'll learn to recognize situations and know what's worked best in those situations before. The same way you'd look over your own training to learn from your own mistakes." "MMK, I think I get it," Tobeo, the spokesman of the clone, said thoughtfully, rubbing his chin for a moment with his eyes scrunched up in thought. Then his eyes snapped open. "Wait, Gnarl, you think this clone training would work with learning how to use my sword too?" The minion master blinked at the sudden topic change, but adapted quickly. I don't know, sire, it depends on whether you get the reflexes your clones start to develop or not." Well, just got to try it out, then, huh?" The blonde set his book in his lap before putting his hands into a cross seal, creating a clone that almost immediately dispelled. "There, the real me knows to create some clones to try that now." And with that, the blonde clone began to read its book once again. Gnarl shook his head stupidly, so much potential. "Nah, Gnarl, why am I studying history again?" Naruto guzzled down his bottle of water even as he sat on top of the river near his and Jiraiya's camp. Had just finished a long training sequence with his weighted adachi, and he was a little tired. Now, with his blade stuck to his back with chakra almost unconsciously, he pondered something that hadn't come up more than once in the 4 months since had gone to the Netherworld the first time. "Hey, Gnarl." There was a moment of silence on the other end of the link as the minion master hurried to respond, "Yes, sire." "Why hasn't Giblet forged me a new adachi yet? We've already learned all the seals that Jiraiya is willing to teach me that could help." "Ah, well, there's a bit of a problem, sire." Naruto's brow wrinkled. "What kind of problem?" The elder minion hesitated. "Well, you remember how we minions enhanced the overlord's equipment?" At this, Naruto scowled even as he sent an affirmative thought. Yeah, he knew how they did it. They literally sacrificed minions by the hundreds to pour their life force into the new equipment and make it stronger than any man-made piece. Supposedly, that combined with chakra-conductive minerals, magical runes, and chakra seals would make an ungodly powerful piece of equipment. Supposedly. But that was all moot because Naruto was still uneasy about sacrificing his minions. Despite Gnarl's continuous assertions that the minions weren't just willing but happy to sacrifice themselves to always be near him, it still made Naruto uneasy. Had accepted it, but just barely. "Well, sire, it seems that the equipment that Giblet has in mind." The minion's mental voice became hesitant and apologetic. "Kinda needs more life force than we can spare without compromising the Netherworld's defenses." Now Naruto really scowled. "So you need more life force to make my new equipment?" "Yes, sire. And I'm not going to slaughter the animals required to gather it." The minion's wince was almost audible over the link. "That would be the problem, sire. A ninja-overlord in training downed the last of his water and ground his teeth together. Isn't there any other way to gather life force? I mean, come on. There's little things dying all around me all the time. Like bugs and crap. Why can't I get their life force?" "Well, sire, you could. It's just what, Tobeo?" "Well, since they don't have enough life force to leave self-sustaining energies, you'd have to quiet your own in order to collect them." It took Naruto a moment to puzzle through what Gnarl had said. "So to absorb their dying energy, I have to be quiet." You have to quiet everything about yourself. You have to sit completely still and draw on the fading life energies around you. It's not something most overlords bother with." Naruto met at this. It sounded like a good idea, honestly. He didn't plan on using that stuff in combat, just adding to the life force pool for his minions. "So, how would I learn how to do this?" "Well, we do have a stalagmite." "Ah. You guys are crazy, Tobeo." "I'm sorry, sire, but it is the best way to learn how to be completely still." The ninja-overlord in training huffed. Trying to sit perfectly still on a flat board balanced very carefully on a stalagmite was insane. Gnarl noticed his overlord's hesitance. Well, the boy had collected some life force from the occasional bandit and enemy ninja that had faced. It was never going to be enough to fuel the army he needed. And when Gnarl had suggested that the boy slaughter a village to get some extra life force, had surprised the old minion by pointing out quite logically, slaughtering any number of people is a quick way to attract attention, something we don't want to do just yet, and it'd never do something like that anyways. Still, they needed that extra life force. So, a challenge was in order. Well, at this rate you might be able to learn how to draw on life force in 6 months or so, but don't get your hopes up, sire, it is exceedingly difficult to do safely. The scowl on the blonde's face was all the answer Gnarl needed. Nah, Iro-senin. What is it, brat? Naruto didn't look up from the Rasengan he held between his hands as he walked. I just thought to ask, how do you move through the dirt like you did yesterday? The whole burrowing without using your hands thing. Jiraiya blinked. You want to learn how to do that? Naruto beamed at the old pervert. Yep, it looks like it'd be really useful. Baldasanin snorted. There was a smile on his face. Alright kid, first I gotta teach you a more basic earth technique, then we'll work up to moving underground. The blonde nodded vigorously, even though had been able to get Iro-senin to teach him a good bit about seals and help with refine his taijutsu and kinjutsu. Whenever Head tried to get the old man to teach him more ninjutsu, the white-haired pervert had said no. Basically, the pervert had said you wanted to work on your chakra control and hand seals before you learned more jutsu, so that's what you're going to do. Until I think you're good enough at those, I'm not going to teach you any more ninjutsu. Naruto hated to admit it, but Head worked himself into that corner on his own. And now, it looked like he was ready to learn more. He actually bounced along beside the old man as he showed Naruto the hand seals to his first earth technique. 8 months. That was how long it'd been since Naruto had left Konohagakure. 23 weeks. That was how long had been a ninja-overlord in training. 2 months. This was how long had been sending clones to the netherworld to learn how to draw on the life force around him. And had just mastered it. If jumping up and shouting to the heavens wouldn't have ruined his concentration, Naruto would have done it. As it was, he was sitting cross-legged in his tent and drawing on the natural energies around him. The blonde could feel the energy flowing into him, then flowing through him, into his headband and back to the netherworld. The energy seemed to want to change his body, but it never got a chance before being absorbed by the minion hives. Now it was only a matter of time before he got his new equipment. Naruto let himself grin in the dark. Naruto lounged in his stone throne, propping his head up with a hand, even as his other hand played across the engravings in the arms of the throne. Had just gotten large enough to pull this off in the large chair. The minions had been quite happy to redecorate the throne room with both spiral and kitsune motifs, something that Naruto had to admit looked good. The arms of his throne were the heads of grinning foxes, and the back resembled the Kyuubi's head, its teeth framing Naruto's head. And behind the throne, 9 streams of lava poured out of thin air to snake their way down and form a crescent-shaped pool of magma that halfway encircled the ninja-overlord. Frankly, it was pretty badass. The pillars that supported the magnificent hall had spiral designs engraved into them, and the stone floors had been redone to swoop up from the main floor to the raised area that the throne rested on. It was quite nice really, but Naruto had gotten used to it some time ago. Now he was waiting. Just waiting, and it was difficult, to say the least. It'd been almost 10 months since had left Konohagakure to train with Jiraiya, and his suit of armor was finally getting done. Naruto was honestly overjoyed. Had been spending the first few hours each night in a meditative trance, absorbing the life force around him to increase the amount available to him. Giblet had finally collected enough extra to safely forge up a suit of armor and sword for him. It didn't bother Naruto very much anymore that he would be sacrificing his minions by the thousands tonight to forge his armor. Gnarl had finally beat it into Naruto's head that the minions were almost as expendable as his shadow clones. Naruto loved the minions, they were funny, loyal, and accepted him with open arms, Kyuubi or not. But they were expendable. It had been a hard concept to wrap his mind around. Almost as hard as learning how to wait. Both of his teachers, Gnarl and Jiraiya, had been trying him patience. And Naruto had a feeling if Head had either of them singularly, it'd have taken him much longer to learn. Had learned it, but he didn't enjoy it, nor did he have to practice it much yet. If he and Jiraiya were traveling, Naruto would wake up and make about 50 clones to study tactics, history, science, and minion control in the netherworld under Gnarl. Head then run through his morning workout as another clone made breakfast, stretches and all. As he and Jiraiya walked, Head practiced whatever jutsu Jiraiya had taught him recently, even as he kept his sword and several leaves stuck to various places on his body. At lunch break, Head run through his Dachi katas, even as his clones made lunch for them, preferably on a body of water or vertical surface, while still floating his leaves. Then at dinner Head run through all of his katas before sitting down to practice either moving through the dirt or the Rasengan, which he still could use one-handed in a real fight. Sometimes Head even spar with Jiraiya before going to bed, being sure to gather life force for at least 2 hours before dispelling his clones and falling asleep. Things didn't change much if Jiraiya decided to stop somewhere. Head start the days the same, sending some clones to the netherworld to study before going off to train for a while. Usually, Head spend his mornings fighting off either a swarm of his own clones or fighting one supercharged clone at a time. Once again, preferably over water and or while floating leaves over random parts of his body. That was always fun, and he often got lunch with a number of bruises on various places on his body, but a grin on his face. It was after that Head sometimes tag along with Jiraiya. Had gotten the old pervert to actually admit that he acted as perverted as he did mostly as a cover, and now the Sannin was showing Naruto some of the tricks to managing and creating a spy network. Naruto loved those days. But Had learned that when Jiraiya said you can't come with me today that he meant you can't come with me today, sorry. On those days Had usually practice more on his katas and push himself physically, even as he had a slew of clones practice the techniques he knew and an even greater number work on his chakra control. The original Naruto usually didn't spend a whole lot of time in the netherworld, usually letting clones deal with the going-ons and learning. Today though, he sat in his mighty throne and waited. Had left a clone back in his world with the others, so if Jiraiya needed him the man could just talk to the clones, which would never say they were clones or that they were real. Neither up the uncomfortable truth nor telling his sensei a lie. Master? Naruto blinked, his attention coming to the group of minions now standing before his throne. Minions with his armor. Naruto grinned. Diblet, you've got my armor and sword. Yes, master. The minion's cross between an accent and a lisp was always amusing to Naruto, armor's done and swords just finishing cooling. Naruto stood, almost bouncing down to the small gathering of minions. Great. Let's get that thing on then to Bayo. Naruto chuckled happily, I really like, the ninja-overlord in training turned this way and that, examining himself in the mirror his minions had brought. In preparation for his new set of armor, Had bought black versions of the standard ninja sandals that covered his toes and a pair of black fingerless gloves. Had also gotten several pairs of long black pants and the best damn jacket Had ever seen. Black sleeves and shoulders, a thick stripe of black down the front and dark orange covering his sides and lower back. It even had a thin chainmail on the inside. It was awesome. Now though, he was wearing his armor over the ensemble, and he loved it. He looked for all the world like a particularly badass combination between a samurai and a ninja, at least in his mind. It resembled Dumeru, the lighter armor of samurai foot soldiers, but only selective pieces of it. While he kept the cuirass, shoulder plates, gauntlets, and greaves, the armor didn't cover his upper arms or thighs, and he just went without the helmet entirely. The black of his clothes contrasted wonderfully with the burnt orange plates of magically enhanced steel, all of which had black spiral and/or tasteful black stripes, adding camouflage to the armor. The armor even fused halfway to the clothing, becoming just as much a part of the outfit as the jacket itself. With that and the plate of his first headband set on the black strip of cloth tied around his forehead, Naruto felt like a serious ninja for the first time in his life. It was exciting. And kinda scary. Have to ask Jiraiya if that was normal he thought as he fingered the collar of his jacket. Something's missing then it hit him, even though his necklace, the necklace of the first Hokage, was safely tucked away under the armor and jacket, his neck was just a little too bare. He'd have to get a scarf or muffler to complete the look. Jiraiya's going to flip to Bayo. Maelstrom cleaved through the final clone, going completely through the chakra construct before the two halves could explode. Taking a deep breath, Naruto spun his sword twice before settling it onto his back diagonally without a thought. He turned to Jiraiya and bowed low, his breathing slightly labored as he waited for his review. It'd been a year since they'd left Konoha, and Naruto was giving Niro-sen the works. Every trick he knew, every move had learned, the best tactics he could muster. After Naruto had come back from the netherworld with not only a new set of armor, but also a matte black version of his old Adachi, Jiraiya had drawn the line. The aged pervert had taken Naruto well outside of town and given him an ultimatum. Either tell Jiraiya where he was getting all of these things and extra training, or Jiraiya dumped him right here. Naruto took it as the serious threat it'd been, and after a brief consultation with Gnarl, had told his perverted sensei much, though not all, that had transpired behind closed doors. He told Jiraiya about the contract Had made, how it worked out accidentally, how Had been using minions to grab him books and scrolls to train himself from, how the minions were the ones to make him his new equipment, how Had used shadow clones to train in the netherworld. And Had introduced Jiraiya to Gnarl. The old man and even older minion had talked to each other warily for a while, dueling with words and wits. Naruto had wisely kept his mouth shut as they did. The two had found that they actually had a couple things in common. They were both perverts, they both were a lot cleverer than they let on, and they both had a hint of a sadistic streak, Gnarl more so than Jiraiya. It had taken an entire day for the two of them to get comfortable enough with each other to hash out a new training schedule for Naruto. Jiraiya would often leave a shadow clone of his own to watch over Naruto's training when the boy wasn't accompanying him during his more serious research. The pervert clone would correct Naruto's stances, his form, and his chakra usage in ways that Gnarl just didn't have the experience or knowledge to. Today was special though. Today Jiraiya himself had taken Naruto out to the bottom of a small rocky ravine. Had asked Niro-sen what they were doing, loudly and repeatedly, and despite the older man's insistence that he just wanted to see how far his student had come, the blonde just knew something else was going on. And now, bowed before his sensei, he waited for the shit to hit the fan. Jiraiya nodded and stood, alright, looks like you're far enough. I knew it, Tabayo. Naruto straightened, giving his back a stretch, far enough for what? A start to seriously draw on the Kyuubi's chakra. Jiraiya wasn't just using his, I'm actually a pretty good teacher when I put my mind to it voice, he was using his don't forget, I'm arguably as strong and intelligent as Orochimaru voice. That meant he was pretty damn serious. Okay, I don't really get what the big deal is, but okay, Naruto tried so hard not to be disrespectful, but he couldn't help a small eye roll at his sensei's serious tone. Jiraiya scowled and Naruto's back instinctively stiffened. Listen brat, we're talking about drawing on the power of the greatest evil this world has ever seen. Well, the Kyuubi no Yoko isn't really evil actually, it's a natural force with a certain degree of intelligence. It's not especially malicious, just completely without morals or regard for human life. The Kyuubi no Yoko is no more evil than a hurricane or volcano, though I imagine it's quite irritated about being locked inside a child for as long as it has been. Naruto paused, considering the minion master's words before his attention returned to his surroundings. At Jiraiya's look, he relayed Gnarl's words. The Toad Sage really scowled at that, and while he didn't disagree, he did add, that doesn't mean it isn't exceedingly dangerous. Jiraiya is correct sire, this should be approached with caution. It could be an amazing resource, but you should be careful in learning how to use it. With both of his senseis agreeing on that, Naruto simply nodded, alright, what do we do? This was kinda weird. Naruto had been going through another growth spur, absurdly happy that between Jiraiya, Gnarl, Giblet and himself, they'd developed a seal that would allow clothing and equipment to adjust to the owner's size. So there were no worries about his stuff getting too small for him, and since it was magical, he didn't have to worry about it wearing out. But now, he was sitting in just his boxers, with two perverted old men staring at his stomach. Even though he knew they didn't like boys, it was kinda creepy. He was molding just enough chakra to make the seal on his stomach show so Gnarl and Jiraiya could examine it. Apparently, the seal was very similar to old magic that Gnarl was quite familiar with, and Jiraiya was a seal master. What they were trying to figure out was how to modify the seal to make it easier and safer for Naruto to draw out the Kyuubi's chakra. Naruto only understood about half of what they were saying, the blonde just didn't know enough about sealing to keep up. But he knew enough to be optimistic. It seemed Gnarl knew of a similar attempt to bind a powerful source of evil, and said evil had been sealed into a full-grown man, rather than a newborn child. While the Kyuubi was several degrees of magnitude stronger, the seal drew on the power of the seal to fuel it, so that was a non-issue. The seal had allowed the man to draw on the evil being's power whenever he wanted, and would automatically cut off as it reached levels that were dangerous to the seal bearer. The difference was that the older seal hadn't allowed a gradual absorption like Naruto's did. It had only been on or off, the man had gotten no side benefits like enlarged chakra capacity, fast healing, or slightly enhanced senses like Naruto did. While this new seal would put a definite limit on the amount of Kyuubi's chakra Naruto could draw on, it would also make it easier and safer to draw on the Kyuubi's power. And unless Naruto was misunderstanding the old men, placing it would involve loosening Shishu-Fuin slightly and very slightly, increasing the constant amount of Yaki seeping into Naruto's system. So this new seal would make it easier to draw on an effectively infinite source of power, make it safer to draw on said power, and make him permanently stronger, faster, and tougher. He just couldn't stop winning. Suck on that Kyuubi. 6 months. It'd been 6 months since they'd modified the Shishu-Fuin. Naruto hadn't felt better in his life. The modified seal did exactly as advertised, and aside from the particularly painful growth spurt that had accompanied the influx of Yaki, Naruto was doing great. His senses were sharper, he was stronger, faster, and from the looks he was getting, better looking too. This was amazing. Naruto was practically flying up the side of the cliff, even with weighted training armor, even with gravity seals that would try to counteract every movement Naruto made, as long as he pumped chakra through them, even without letting chakra enhance his speed and strength he felt invincible. He wasn't, and he knew it. Without actually using the Kyuubi's chakra, Jiraiya could still mop the floor with him. He just felt invincible. And he kinda liked it to be honest. Gnarl had promised him when this began that Naruto would be respected, loved, and feared. And even though Naruto felt different sometimes, Gnarl was delivering. When he saved people for whatever reason, they often loved him and showered him with affection. When he went with Jiraiya to meet with nobles, he was able to act with enough class to avoid making an ass of himself, but retain enough of his attitude to be Naruto, and it was earning him respect. Even his enemies were starting to take notice. They'd scavenged a bingo book off an Iwa nin had killed yesterday. The nin had been attacking a village they'd been hired to defend and hadn't gotten the meaning of Yao outmatched, give up. But what was startling was near the back of the book, one of the newer entries was a very simple warning with a rough sketch beside it. A rough sketch of him. Name? Uzumaki Naruto, Haka. The demon fox, the samurai nin, the demon summoner, that guy that pulls armies out of nowhere. Estimated rank. High B, possible A. Village affiliation. Konohagakure. Age. Unknown, teen. Distinguishing features. Blonde hair, blue eyes, whisker marks on cheeks, dark orange and black armor, samurai armor, black scarf, carries a large udachi, loud. Known jutsu. Shadow clone, Rasengan, summoning jutsu, small oni, Doten. Known abilities. B rank stealth, B rank kinjutsu, B rank taijutsu, no known jinjutsu, A rank physical strength, B rank speed, SS rank chakra capacity, possible jinchuriki. Hekai Genkai. Unknown. Known teammates. Jiraiya the Sannin, Sharingan Kakashi, former, unconfirmed. Reward. 150,000 ryo. He was in a bingo book. Seriously. Like, wanted and everything. It was one of the best days of his life. Naruto flipped over the edge of the cliff, landing almost soundlessly. Gotta work on that. With a quick check of the area around him to ensure privacy, Naruto sat down on the dirt and started gathering his chakra. Gnarl had said he had a gift for the blonde, and Naruto wanted to find out what it was. He ran through the hand seals for the summoning, and with a clap of his hands, summoned himself to the segmented circle in the floor a ways in front of the platform his throne sat upon. Gnarl. I'm here. Naruto practically bounced up the steps to his throne, throwing himself onto it and draping himself across, even as he listened for the aged minion's response. Ah, sire, it's good that you're home. The grey minion shuffled into the dim light of the magma behind the chair, smiling well evilly at Naruto, though with no evil intent towards Naruto himself. The blonde practically shot up in his seat, beaming at his servant. You said you had something for me to bayo. Your stuff's always cool. What is it? What is it? It was at moments like this that the energetic kid that Naruto had always been shown through the slightly more serious face he showed the world. Gnarl had gotten quite good at suppressing the shudder and revulsion that were his first reaction to such cheer and goodwill. Yetch. Anymore, all Gnarl had to do was remind himself of the raw potential the boy showed. Had matured some since had first come to the netherworld, both emotionally and physically. And what was better, in Gnarl's mind, the boy was more willing to kill than before. Quicker to draw the line between enemy and friend, and was starting to understand the difference between enemy, civilian, subordinate, and ally. He was becoming less and less a hero, and more an overlord. And now for the final touch. I believe you are finally ready to learn magic, m'lord. 2 years. It'd been 2 years since Naruto had left Konohagakure with Jiraiya-san. Naruto had spent much of his free time learning how to use both magic and chakra interchangeably. It was a lot harder than it sounded. Not only did he have to learn how to use magic from scratch, which wasn't that hard thankfully, since the netherworld still had access to several spellstones, but he also had to learn how to use them both at the same time, which was hard. Had learned how to pump mana through his armor, making it even stronger. Had figured out how to push mana into his sword, making Maelstrom's blade burn with orange flames. Had even learned how to pour mana into his minions, increasing their strength, speed, and toughness to high chunin levels. As it was, he had little talent for actual spells. He could throw a fireball and release a stream of fire from his hand, but that was about it. The tower had a few other spells available, but Naruto was having enough trouble integrating what he already had into his fighting style. And it certainly had changed. He didn't spam Shadow Clone as much as he used to, main because it split his magical power amongst the clones, in addition to his chakra. It made the spells cast by each Naruto that much weaker. Instead, he summoned a slew of minions and pumped them up with his minion spell. Outside of combat, Naruto was always channeling chakra through his armor to keep the gravity seals working, mimicking the resistance of weights without actually increasing his mass. It was just as unconscious as holding Maelstrom to his back. But in combat, Naruto could easily pull his chakra in, increasing his strength and speed, not only by removing his weights, but by actually increasing his strength and speed. It was almost as large of a jump in ability as Rock Lee had pulled in the Chunin exam prelims. He used his massive reservoirs of chakra to fuel body flickers, replacements, various earth jutsu, and the occasional Rasengan. It was actually really effective. After Jiraiya had corrected Naruto's usage of the replacement jutsu, which had been royally fucking up in several ways, Gnarl had immediately had the ninja-overlord in training practice it till it was nearly second nature. If he had just a half-second's warning he could and would switch out with one of the 4 observational clones he always made before a fight. To be honest, Naruto hadn't really been hit by an enemy in almost 3 months. Oh, they got close and all. He had to replace himself a number of times, sometimes multiple times in a single fight. But the look on people's faces when the blonde they stabbed exploded into smoke was the best part. Before he burst from the ground nearby and stabbed them, of course, the shock on their faces then was usually even better. It was like one big, particularly messy prank. Speaking of pranks. Today, he was going to get to pull a prank to rival even his infamous painting of the Hokage monument. He was going to trick the daimyo. Oh, and paint the guy's palace pink just cause he could. Jiraiya had decided to take Naruto to the daimyo's court with some prodding from Gnarl, under the pretense of getting some experience at dealing with upper-ranking nobles. While this was true, unbeknownst to the two ninja, Gnarl was trying to gather some information on the system which his new master operated under to make it easier for him to guide his master in his, hopefully hostile, takeover. Naruto might not been consciously aware of that, but on some level, he knew that's what this was. Information gathering on his own daimyo. The blonde had to work to keep the dark grin off his face. This was going to be fun. That had not been fun. Naruto was now of the firm belief that the daimyo of Fire Country was an imbecilic twit unworthy of his title and status, amongst many more, less savory things. Oh, the man was nice enough, but he was just arg. The blonde had to bite back a scream of frustration as he tried to meditate on his guest bed in the daimyo's palace. Naruto had come with Jiraiya with every intention of impressing the daimyo. It couldn't hurt to make connections with a man that could help him become Hokage after all. The thing was, it had been far too easy. They'd entered the daimyo's greeting chambers, which paled in comparison to the one Naruto had in the netherworld, and waited for the daimyo to arrive. The snooty-looking man had come in, all pomp and circumstance, his court and advisors tagging along behind him like the lapdogs they were. After they'd exchanged the usual pleasantries of "I grovel at your feet, mighty daimyo, even though I could destroy this whole place with my left pinky, and I accept your groveling, my ninja servant, and completely disregard the fact that you're more powerful individually than I can even understand," the ninja in the room had sat down from the non-ninja. That hadn't been the problem. Heck, Naruto wasn't naive enough to think that it would have started any other way. It's just the way nobles operated. He didn't like it, but it wasn't smart to yell at your own lord. No, the problem had come when the daimyo had politely asked about Naruto. Jiraiya had warned him that the daimyo would do that, mostly because Jiraiya hadn't even told the man had taken on an apprentice, let alone give the daimyo an inkling who Naruto was. As such, Naruto had to introduce himself. So, head bowed enough to be properly respectful and did just that. "My name is Uzumaki Naruto, daimyo-sama. I've been called a number of things, few as impressive as Jiraiya-sensei's. My personal favorite is the orange maelstrom." Naruto had given the group an amused, if subdued, smirk. "I've been training with Jiraiya-sensei for the last couple years, so I could achieve my dream, and I believe I'm almost ready." Naruto had paused before meeting the daimyo's eyes. "I am going to be the next Hokage. Believe it." The daimyo flipped open his fan and did the stupidest thing Naruto had seen in a long time. "Oh ho. Then I'll be sure to support your case the next time it comes up." It wasn't that he'd given Naruto recognition and respect, that was actually pretty nice, it was that he was actually serious. The man didn't know who Naruto was, all he knew about Naruto was that he was Jiraiya's student. Nothing else. For all the daimyo knew, Naruto cold been a failure of failures. He cold been the worst ninja on the planet. He cold easily been the worst possible leader for Konoha. There'd been no flash of recognition in the man's eyes at either Naruto's name or his most common title, so he cold claimed to have heard good things about the boy. And it infuriated Naruto that the daimyo, his daimyo, had been so quick to support someone he didn't even know as a candidate for Hokage. Just because he'd made a nice introduction speech. Naruto was disillusioned with the man right then and there, slapping his foxy grin into place and playing along, instead of letting his disgust show. "Thank you, daimyo-sama." The genin had played along with the playings back and forth of the court, mostly keeping his mouth shut and watching Iro-sennin manipulate the nobles and attendants with surprising subtlety. He still occasionally forgot that Jiraiya was smarter than he let people believe and only peeped on women because he wanted to. But that was all beside the point. The point was this. Uzumaki Naruto was pissed off. Very pissed off. After the enlightening session with the daimyo and his court, Jiraiya had requested rooms for the two of them, and Naruto actually had to turn down an offer of attendance to remove his armor. If he hadn't been so angry, he might have been flattered, but as it was he only saw the foolish kindness of someone who didn't know when he was being insulting. It was as if he assumed Naruto couldn't get his own armor off. Naruto had spent the past 3 hours struggling to stay still enough to absorb life force. It'd taken him an entire hour longer than usual in his state of mind. He finally called it quits, doing his best to push his anger away. It would do him no good to be furious at the idiot that had been born into his position, no good at all. "Gnarl." "Yes, sire." A foxy grin spread across Naruto's face. It seems the minion had been waiting for Naruto to contact him, not that surprising considering the importance of the prior meeting. "We're going to need a proxy." "Sire." Now Naruto scowled, had expected Gnarl to know what he was talking about, a proxy, a puppet, a replacement. "No, for the daimyo." The older minion's stunned silence spoke for itself. "Come on. The current one is far too easy to manipulate. Normally that'd be nice, but only if I could actually be here enough to manipulate him and keep other people from doing so to Bayo. No way I'm letting someone like him lead my country." Naruto huffed, crossing his arms in front of his chest as his face scrunched up and thought, "Ideally I'd just shove him out of the way and absorb his position into the Hokages, letting handpicked shinobi and samurai replace his advisors and such and rule in his stead, while I run Konohagakure and deal with the other shinobi villages." Tilting his head up, Naruto's face smoothed some, his brow furrowed and his eyes closed as he contemplated the problem. However, that's impractical to Bayo. I would already have to be Hokage for that to work, and it'd need some major disaster war to save the country from to make it stick. Otherwise it'd have riots not just in the civilian population, but also in the samurai and certain shinobi groups. His chin tucked to his chest now. Yes, that's out, but now that I think about it, I have no way of viably replacing the man either, damn it. Sire. Naruto huffed, even if you could find a suitable replacement for the man, there's no way we could legally insert them in the daimyo's stead, even less of a way for someone to pretend to be the daimyo for extended periods of time. Well, sire, what about the coup? Naruto cut his minion off. I already considered that, but I'm not willing to have some idiot start a war just for me to save them from it. It's far too likely Konoha would get involved in fighting them off for trying to oust the pretender. I'm not willing to take the risk that my friends would be involved. Naru was stunned, to say the least. Had been trying to get the new overlord to actually think things through more and plan ahead ever since Head started training the boy in the ways of evil, but this was the first time Head ever really seen results. Naruto huffed again, kicking his legs out and falling back onto the bed, pillowing his head with his hands. Just taking over is out, caused the people riot, and the armies and shinobi would fight it. Replacing the guy with an imposter under my control isn't viable. We don't have anyone capable of such long-term infiltration. I have no way of getting someone in line for the seat and then having the daimyo die of natural causes. And am unwilling to take the risks involved in puppeteering a coup from which to save the country. The blonde scowled. That means I have no currently viable options for which to replace that twit. There was a long pause before the 15-year-old pouted and kicked his shoes off violently. Man, this sucks. Gnarl cold helped the small smile that spread across his face from his spot in the netherworld. Despite the boy's persistent heroic shudder tendencies had grown on Gnarl, and he didn't want the boy to change too much. That pout and huff brought to mind images of a smaller blonde in a neon orange jumpsuit, not the much larger ninja-overlord in training that lay on the bed now. Well, sire, no matter how long it takes, we'll always find a way. The grin that spread across Naruto's face would given the Kyuubi a run for its money. Yes, Gnarl, yes we will. Jiraiya just stared at his student's armored back. After meeting with the daimyo of Fire Country, the boy had insisted that they swing by Wagakure, Kumagakure, and Kurigakure. Something Jiraiya had argued against fervently, especially Iwa, considering that the boy looked so much like the yondaime. The brat's reply had been to transform into an attractive young woman with long blonde hair and amber eyes. Jiraiya's response to that had been to point out that even an actual transformation instead of an illusion might fool people, but he'd have to keep it up 24/7. Naruto had looked Jiraiya square in the eye and said, when I maintain this all the way to Iwa, y'all show me how you usually get in. Jiraiya hadn't really had a response to that. So he gave it a shot. The boy had stopped boasting somewhere in around the first year of training. He no longer had to. The boy had maintained his transformation all the way to Iwa, going so far as creating an entirely new person for his cover. Jiraiya had buckled when they got to Iwa and taught the kid the Toten Jutsu, the transparent escape technique. Had once told Orochimaru that it was no fun teaching a genius, and he still stuck by that now. It wasn't a bad experience actually teaching the kid, it was the feeling of terror afterwards. Instead of training his body like he normally had, the boy had simply been the girl that hung on Jiraiya's arm, tagging along with the Sannin, and learning everything he could about the art of spying and infiltration. The brat had made looking like a ditzy girl look easy, and consequently learned a number of Wagakure's secrets, simply by playing a dumb blonde slut. He wasn't sure whether or not to be surprised that the boy had developed his own contacts and the beginnings of his own spy network on the side. After the surprisingly successful test run in Iwa, Jiraiya had been only a bit hesitant to take the boy to the other two hidden villages. Naruto hadn't liked Iwa, had told Jiraiya that to his face, this place it's horrible. There was so much to spare his face, so like Minato's and yet not, had hardened, when Hokage will either absorb them into Konoha or wipe it from the face of the earth. When they'd left Kiri, the Toad Sage had innocently posed a question, so, going to wipe this place off the map too? The boy had beamed at him, nah, these guys are just crazy, not evil or mean. I kinda liked them. That had been unsettling, but the terror had only really started to set in when they'd left Kumagakure. The look on the boy's face as Head dispelled his transformation that night in the woods was somber. Jiraiya-sensei. Head paused before sitting down beside his student, keeping his tone gentle. Yeah kid. I heard about something, but cold to ask about it without breaking cover. The blonde's voice was uncharacteristically quiet as he stared at the recently lit fire. You should know about it though, it was a secret, just. What is it kid? About 10 years ago, Kumo tried to kidnap a Hyuga, right? Jiraiya had nodded slowly. I've been thinking about that. It would have tove been the main branch, cause they could get the Byakugan off a branch member, and the guys had been talking about a little girl and Naruto's eyes had lifted from the fire to stare out into the darkness. I only know one main branch Hyuga, that fits what little description they gave. I just want it confirmed. It taken Jiraiya a couple seconds to sort through the bits of now old information in his head, but when Head remembered the details, he spoke. Yeah kid, 10 years ago, the Cloud Ambassador to Konoha tried to kidnap Hyuga Hinata. The kid's eyes had hardened and pulsed a dark red before he stood and set about making dinner, mumbling something under his breath that Jiraiya only just caught. Gotta remember to be extra nice to her when I get home. Hey Naruto. The blonde had given Jiraiya a pleasantly curious look and had known the boy was reconstructing the happy mask he oftentimes wore. What are you going to do? The smile had given Jiraiya was warm and genuine, if a bit sad. I'm going to be real nice to Hinata until I can make it up to her. I was never really all that nice to her before and I've got to make up for not paying attention after she got kidnapped like that. Probably scared the shy girl half to death. Naruto. You know what I mean. It was in that moment when the blonde grinned at him that Jiraiya was actually scared. Not of Naruto, but of what the boy could and would likely do. I would get a chance to join, Kumo doesn't. And Jiraiya was bringing this teen, this monster with a smile, this boy with a tender heart, he was bringing him to Konoha. Their home. Something Gnarl had said to him one time as they'd watched Naruto train came to mind. The minions want nothing to do with a hero, we will only follow a ruler, a lord over men. That boy if he was just one of your ninjas, just another cage, I might send him back and burn the summoning scroll, might even killed him, but that boy. Yes, he's a ninja. Yes, he will be your Hokage. But he will be more than just that. He will be the overlord. Jiraiya hadn't known exactly what Head meant then, but now. Now he did, and it made even someone like him uneasy. Oh, Konoha would probably rule the world by the time the kid passed away, but would it still be the Konoha that Jiraiya loved? Hey Iro Sennin. I can see the gates. It was the day of reckoning. It was the day of reckoning. He was home. It's been almost 2.5 years hasn't it? It wasn't really a question. Yeah it has. The teen stopped in the middle of the street and took a deep breath. The grin that spread across his face was contagious, and with barely contained joy, the blonde nearly flew up the side of a nearby building. His black shoes were almost silent as they touched the top of the water tower, but he didn't stay that way long, because after another deep breath he shouted to the world with arms wide to embrace it, I've missed this place. A small chuckle escaped the blonde as he stuffed his hands into his pockets, a serene smile settling across his face. I really did miss this place as blue eyes swept across the village. His village. His home was that. Hell looks like they finally got around to carving Aba-chan's face on the mountain. The teen blinked. You've grown a lot haven't you, Naruto? He turned towards the voice with a smile, even as the speaker raised a hand in greeting. Yo. Kakashi-sensei. Ha. You haven't changed a bit. The blonde hopped down from his perch, landing lightly beside his old teacher, even as his face lit up. Oh yeah. Got something for you. Naruto rummaged in the pack slung over his shoulder till he found the item he was looking for, presenting it to his former sensei. The masked Jounin's eye widened. Why you how but this is. Naruto placed the book in his sensei's hands, grinning unabashedly at the man. Yep. Icha Tactics, latest in the series. The grin became devious, and it's a rare, signed, uncut version too. When the older man let out a strangled sound of happiness, Naruto knew his job here was done. Right. Naruto checked off the first box on his things to do upon return to Konoha list of the day. Next stop, Ichiraku Ramen. It wasn't that Naruto didn't like the minions' cooking, it was actually quite delicious and probably a lot better for him, but come on, it was old man Tuchi's ramen and Naruto hadn't had it in years, literally. The teenager took off down the street at a relatively slow pace, little more than a civilian jog. Not too far behind him, Jiraiya spoke with Kakashi, as promised, I'll leave him to your care. The older man hesitated as they walked behind Naruto at a more sedate pace. You don't seem like the type to start him wearing armor or using a sword. The Sannin frowned, I didn't. Tomorrow I'm going to give a full report to Tsunade at 8. You need to be there. Jiraiya didn't take his eyes off their student. I'm going to be off gathering information by the end of this week at the latest. I'm afraid the Akatsuki are getting impatient, they might make their move soon. The two older men's attention refocused on their blonde student a ways ahead of them, who had just run into a certain pink-haired Kunoichi. That's Sakura-chan. Hey Naruto. Two Sannin, two apprentices, and one particularly lazy Jounin huddled together, arguably the 5 strongest ninja currently in the village, all in one spot. Sakura did her best cute impression, giving her old teammate a shy smile. How do I look? Do I look more like a woman now? Warning bells went off in Naruto's head. Danger, danger. Tact required. Don't say something stupid. Neutral answer. Complimentary but true. Complimentary but true. He gave his friend a smile, a real one, and said with conviction, you look like a true Kunoichi. Her jaw dropped slightly before immediately closing. The young woman huffed and looked away, fighting to keep a scowl on her face, even as a light shade of pink tinted her cheeks. You still don't get women do you? Naruto chuckled embarrassedly as he scratched the back of his neck, accidentally drawing attention to something Sakura hadn't noticed before. Hey, you've gotten taller than me. Naruto blinked, doing a double take of his own before grinning wildly. Yeah, looks like it. Well, the blonde amused himself by trying to count the number of centimeters he had on her. Sakura couldn't help but smile affectionately at him. Naruto, you've gotten a lot stronger since the last time I saw you. The girl didn't have to be a chakra sensor to feel the warmth of Naruto's chakra at this distance. Tsunade and her had bumped into him entirely on accident, and it was only within a couple feet of him that his surging field of chakra was readily obvious. The loud bang stopped any further conversation before it could start. Naruto Nai-chan. Once the speaker was certain all attention was focused on him, he became a sexy no jutsu. Jiraiya ogled, Sakura recoiled, Kakashi didn't care, Tsunade gave the boy-turned girl a blank stare, and Naruto smirked. As the nude girl became a clothed boy once again with another loud bang, Naruto almost chuckled, barely restraining himself as Konohamaru spoke. Well, how was that jutsu? Had some real oomph to it, didn't it? Now he let himself chuckle softly and shake his head just a bit before giving the boy a serious look. Konohamaru, I'm sorry, but I'm not a kid anymore. From now on, you shouldn't use that jutsu either. As Naruto stepped closer to the now admonished boy, Sakura felt a peculiar warmth spreading through her chest. Naruto, you haven't just gotten older, you're more mature now too, aren't you? It makes me feel a little sad. You've really become amazing in your time away, haven't you? Konohamaru, Naruto ruffled the boy's hair with a hand. That kind of jutsu has its place mostly as a joke. But, a mischievous grin spread across his formerly serious face, it would be pretty useful against someone like Hiro Sennin. So don't go forgetting it, K. While Konohamaru smiled, Sakura scowled at Naruto without really meaning it. Naruto. Don't encourage perverted jutsu like that. The pink-haired Kunoichi playfully smacked him in the back of the head. Idiot. The teen grinned, rubbing the not slightly sore spot on the back of his head. Hey. I actually used that jutsu to take down a Hokage. It has its uses to Bayo. Sakura went to primary anti-pervert response. Stage 1. Chamber the strike. Stage 2. Sakura Puinch. Idiot. Naruto's face met the dirt at a sizable fraction of the speed of sound. Thankfully, Naruto's face won this particular confrontation. Even as Konohamaru, quite intelligently, made a tactical retreat to a questionably safer position behind Kakashi, Sakura wasn't done. The young woman dragged Naruto out of the ground by his new black scarf so she could berate him for his foolishness properly. You are such an idiot. Only an imbecile like you would try to use that on a cage. She began to shake the boy quite violently. You just had to go and destroy that wonderful feeling of respect I had for you just now, didn't you, ga? Kakashi held his hands up placatingly at his former student. Hey, Sakura calmed down as if on cue. The boy hiding behind him peeked around him. You've got Konohamaru here, terrified. Sakura huffed indignantly and let go of the blonde ninja, momentarily surprised when, instead of falling on his ass, he just straightened his legs. She barely had time to properly process the fact that not only was Naruto a half head taller than she was, but that head recovered from her punch quickly enough to get his feet beneath him. The reason she had so little time to process this was simple. The Hokage was speaking. Right, the nostalgia ends now. Kakashi. Said Jounin's book closed with a snap. It really has been a while, hasn't it? His students looked at him curiously, even as he gave them a reasonably serious look. From now on, the two of you will come with me on team-related missions. It's different from before, it's no longer teacher and pupils. Starting today, we're equal Konoha shinobis. But well, the masked man lifted a hand, a pair of very familiar bells dangling from it. First, I'm a bit curious as to how you've developed. The rules are the same as when we first met. Their smiles were tempered by what? Seriousness. Dedication. Kakashi cold put a name to it. But he liked that look. If you don't come at me with the intent to kill, you will never succeed in getting these bells. Training Area 3. It really brought back memories. The rules are the same as before. It doesn't matter how, but you must get these bells away from me. He let said bells jingle to accentuate the remark. You have till sunrise tomorrow. Man, I really miss this place. Naruto couldn't help to smile at the 3 training logs not far behind Kakashi. Yeah, me too. There was a bit of wistfulness in Sakura's tone as well, the girl's eyes slowly sweeping over the forest beyond the logs. Ah, that's right, Kakashi picked up on the reason for their nostalgia, even as he tore his eye away from the brand new book in his hand. This is where you first trained, isn't it? Team 7. The 3-man team. Naruto scowled. That time for a moment, Kakashi was just as caught up in the past as his students. Sasuke was around too, wasn't he? The melancholy silence settled over the team, Kakashi breaking out of the mood, first to find Sakura curled up into a ball and sniffling, while Naruto gripped his elbows so tightly that his fingers went white, scowling off into the distance. Sasuke's name is a taboo word for these two, huh? The Jounin shut his book with a snap, breaking the spell over the two teens. Well then, shall we begin? Naruto grinned, his right hand going to grasp the hilt of Maelstrom where it rested over his left shoulder. Hey yo, we're not going to try reading your book this time, Kakashi-sensei. The blonde's other hand came up into half of a ram seal. There was the sound of leather flexing as Sakura tugged on the gloves meant to protect her hands from her own ridiculous strength. You've already finished it. No, I think he'll save it for later. Besides, for some reason the book went back into his pouch. I'm getting the feeling that I should take this a bit seriously too. The hit I ate went up and out came the source of nightmares for many ninja. The Sharingan eye, wielded by copycat Kakashi. For a long moment, one generation tried to stare the other down. Then Kakashi deliberately let the bells make the slightest noise. Naruto swung Maelstrom horizontally, a blade of compressed fire flying from the large sword and hurtling straight at Kakashi with a whisper of crescent flame. The older nin went low to the ground, dropping beneath the fire and loosing a trio of shuriken in the blonde's direction. Naruto hadn't been standing still. He deflected the shuriken towards Kakashi with a spin of his sword, even as he rushed behind his own flaming projectile. Naruto continued with his swing and spun on the ball of his foot, turning around fully just feet from Kakashi and thrusting Maelstrom at him in a single move, putting the full force of his spin behind the tip of his blade. Kakashi blurred, his hand grabbing Naruto's blade hand and deflecting the sword into the dirt, even as his other brought a kunai to the blonde's neck, only to find another blade at his own. He created a clone in his own shadow, which then replaced itself with the shuriken that came closest to me. After he deflected them, clever, I might missed it if I didn't have the Sharingan. Well, the lazy copy nin drawled, his voice not showing a hint of the pride he felt in his student. It seems your haste hasn't changed. They paused, both remembering the first time they'd had this test, with very similar results. Then, Kakashi smiled, alright, start. And he was gone in a poof of smoke. Sakura immediately went on the offensive, behind. Left. Right. Above. No. Then it has to be the Kunoichi. Raised her fist high above her head, below. Boom. Naruto leapt away from the still-forming crater at his friend's feet, an eyebrow twitching in disbelief, his thoughts unknowingly mirroring those of his suddenly exposed senseis. Wow, what insane strength. Abe-chan, you taught her more than medical jutsu, didn't you, Tobeo? Hound you? Naruto briefly wondered if it was wrong to be turned on by that a woman that could probably kill him. The Jounin leapt out of the crater, the bells jingling slightly as he did. Right, guess I should do something on my end this time. But it cold with Toshit. Naruto hunkered beside a sitting Sakura, his slow and controlled breathing a counterpoint to the girl's panting. I already knew the Sharingan was amazing, but it sucks being reminded of it. Naruto supplied helpfully. Yeah, and his speed at hand seals it's too fast for me to follow. The girl glanced at the blonde beside her, had surprised her at almost every turn in the fight, showing greater depths of knowledge than she cold guessed. Had apparently been working on the basics a lot during the past 2 years. Naruto had been serious, insightful, and able to include her in his plans on the fly. Sakura honestly wouldn't have been too surprised if he could follow Kakashi-sensei's seals. Sadly though, same here, I'm just picking out some key ones, like tiger or snake. While Sakura nodded to acknowledge the blonde statement, she scowled, if we could somehow stop him from using both hands. We'd be able to get our hands on those bells, if being the keyword Kakashi-sensei is almost as much a monster as Iro-Senin or Abe-chan. Naruto huffed, even as he rested a hand against Maelstrom's matte black blade, while keeping an eye and ear out for their opponent. But neither of them were anywhere near giving up, but even Kakashi-sensei has to have a weak point. If we think it over, the Kunoichi looked over at her partner, whose eyes narrowed in thought. Sakura caught the slight shift in his body. The blonde wanted to assume an exaggerated thinking pose, but restrained himself because of the seriousness of the situation. You really have grown, ne Naruto. They were silent for a long moment before Naruto spoke up softly. Nah, Sakura-chan, you've got better memory than me. Remember the first fight between Kakashi-sensei and Zabuza of the Mist? Sakura's face briefly scrunched up in thought before she replied, yeah, the one where we were all together and Kakashi-sensei got caught in a water prison, right? Yeah, that one. Tell me, when sensei had Zabuza beat, was Zabuza heavily injured? Another brief scowl. Yeah, had just been hit with a grand vortex, right? Well, did he seem particularly tired as well? Her large forehead furrowed in thought. Zabuza hadn't been breathing hard or anything as he lay against that tree, just beat up badly, but not really. But what does that have to do with anything? Sakura knew Naruto was going somewhere with this, and she knew she should see it, damn it, but she couldn't figure it out. What sensei do right after Haku? He noted her confusion. The fake hunter nin left. He collapsed from exhaustion. Sakura's eyes went wide. Naruto turned and grinned at her, sending pleasant little shivers up her spine. Exactly. Those kids, they've certainly gotten better. I haven't gotten a single chance to read my new book, even the Jounin side. I've got to be careful though. If I overuse the Sharingan, it'll run out of stamina. That's my weakness though. I'm surprised. His Sharingan eye narrowed. Naruto isn't using his clones much. The most I've seen so far is 5Y. While Sakura's power is immense, her speed is only mediocre. It's been reasonably easy to dodge her attacks. So far no, the problem is Naruto. Instead of spamming Cage Bunshin like I know he can, has limited himself to support. Why? The Jounin actually scowled at that, a small frown appearing beneath his mask. Whenever I go for Sakura, a clone switches out with her, and there is suddenly a sword in my face. That's considerably faster than before, and his fighting style is far more refined, but he never showed any inclination towards Kenjutsu beforehand. That, and has been leading the attacks, falling into a 1 to 2 to 3 Omega Sakura's fist pattern. It's actually been pretty effective. I've been hard pressed to dodge it every time so far. If they just kept that up, it'd be in trouble. Akasha's frown became a small smile, but that's predictable and Naruto's never predictable. The pair of familiar smells hit the Jounin's nose. They're here. Two Narutos burst from the trees not too far in front of Kakashi, Sakura close behind them. But Kakashi saw the clone coming at him from his 730. The heat of the crescent flame the Naruto behind him had fired was stopped cold when a wall of dirt shot up behind the Jounin. There was barely a pause between the end of one jutsu and the start of another. His hands flew through the seals, and before Sakura and the pair of Narutos were halfway to him, a massive ball of flames was hurtling their way. The Narutos dropped to a knee, pulling Sakura down between them and presenting the armored plates of their shoulders onto the oncoming fireball, chakra surging out of the flat steel to form a pane of surging chakra to meet the fire. It was actually quite interesting to see the chakra-fueled flames of his jutsu be repelled by raw chakra and some minor shape manipulation. It looked especially interesting with the Sharingan. Wait, didn't a clone of Naruto always switch out with Sakura when he put her in danger? Kakashi moved. Sakura's fist went through the wall of earth behind Kakashi, as if it never existed, and continued on through where the Jounin's chest had been only fractions of a second before. Kakashi somersaulted away from the pink-haired powerhouse, catching sight of three Narutos plowing right through his fireball towards his back, their flaming black swords held in front of them. The Kunoichi kept on coming before the debris of his earthen defense even settled back to the ground, and Kakashi had to leap to the right to avoid the vicious punch from his former student. One of the Naruto clones used the Kunoichi's back as a springboard to launch himself into the air. The blonde then began to launch Crescent Flame after Crescent Flame at the Jounin, forcing Kakashi to dodge even further back to avoid the blades of fire. His hands began to go through another set of seals when the other two Narutos somehow slipped through the rain of fire. In that split second, Kakashi realized that Naruto had been planning to interrupt his hand seals with something like this the whole time. It would have worked if Kakashi hadn't begun a backflip at the last possible second, his feet passing through the space the clones' heads would have been had they not pulled up short. Head landed several feet back and finished his seals, Suiton. Tepidama. The airborne Naruto managed to land after the sizable bullet of water had destroyed its companions. All in all, it was a maneuver that wouldn't have worked if he hadn't still had reach on the boy. Wait, why was Naruto's sense so strong? Kakashi launched himself forward, dodging around Naruto's Adachi to land a solid punch to the blonde's face. Kakashi wasn't surprised when the boy disappeared in smoke, nor was he particularly surprised when what he assumed to be the real Naruto finished pulling himself out of the ground where Kakashi had been only a second before. Naruto, this boy, was he really making it up as he went? Or was he planning it all out? They both seemed equally unlikely. Wait, the blonde was grinning wildly at him. Shit. Kakashi glanced behind him, worried that Sakura might take in his distraction as a chance to get closer, but while the girl was approaching him, it was at a sedate pace, and she was still a ways off. The Jounin's eyes snapped back to Naruto. In the half-second his eyes had been off the blonde, the boy had stuck his Adachi onto his back once again. Both ninja tensed, but neither made a move for several very long seconds. Then Naruto slowly took his hand from the hilt of his sword, starting to bring them in front of his chest. Kakashi-sensei. Yes, Naruto. You're in the center of a pretty big clearing, huh? The blonde's hands began to settle into a familiar cross seal. Kakashi did not give the boy the chance. Because he understood exactly what the blonde was implying by that statement. Shuriken flew through the air at the teen, and Naruto had to leap high into the air to avoid them. Another set almost immediately followed the first, aimed right at the airborne blonde. What the boy did made Kakashi's eyebrows go up. The boy created a clone in mid-air and had the clone pull him out of the way. Inventive use of shadow clones, but it's not enough. The original grabbed the clone, turning in the air even as it turned into a massive shuriken. But the moment his feet touched dirt, Kakashi's foot touched his face, hard. Only for the blonde to explode into smoke. It'd been a clone all along. Shit. The masked Jounin flipped and twisted in the air, pulling out a pair of kunai before he landed after his kick, facing the pink-haired Kunoichi across from him. His fears were confirmed when the pinkette gave him a foxy grin, bringing her hands up into a familiar cross seal. Hajuwu Cage Bunshin no Jutsu. For a moment, Kakashi felt as if the world had suddenly gotten blurry. He comforted himself that he wasn't going blind, it was just the absurd number of Sakura lookalikes that were phasing into existence all around him. Damn, I'd be willing to bet the real Sakura is in there somewhere as well. The masked man tilted his head to the side and drawled out, "Oh. I was wondering when this would come out. I was saving it for when I had the space Kakashi-sensei." The first Sakura drew out the syllables of the Jounin's name teasingly, waggling a finger at him. 100 mess is all well and good, but there's no use if they get in each other's way, nah. The quick scan of the crowd confirmed it. The Kunoichi lookalikes were all reasonably spaced apart. That meant Naruto had intentionally created them in this pattern. It seems chakra control wasn't his worst point anymore. 100 times nothing is still nothing, Naruto. Several of the pinkets blinked before that foxy grin settled on every face in the crowd. "I know that, sensei, but shadow clones don't multiply me, they divide, and you can't exactly divide by 0, now can you?" Kakashi paused to think about that. I guess not. The sides of his eyes crinkled as he smiled into the crowd. "That must mean you're more than nothing then, huh, Naruto?" The momentary surprise that rippled through the crowd of Sakuras was not wasted. Kakashi flew through them like a reaper through wheat, his kunes hitting shoulders and knees. Searching for a girl that didn't pop when cut. Kakashi had taken out nearly 30 of the 200-odd clones before they reacted, but react they did. Apparently Naruto hadn't just been working on his kinjutsu. The white-haired man dipped and dodged and moved through the swarm, but it was suddenly a lot harder to hit them than before. Every time the Jounin tried to get out of the clearing, get himself some space and limit the number of clones that could swarm him, several clones would burst at him in a coordinated strike and force him to dodge back into the clearing. Their speed was good, and while Naruto wasn't the powerhouse that Sakura was, Kakashi wasn't about to let himself get hit. One time a clone hit him cornered against a tree, and while the Jounin had done a flip over the oncoming punch, had gotten a good look at what it did to the poor tree. The blonde-turned Sakura had torn off bark, splintered a portion of the trunk, and made a number of cracks appear in the wood. With a single punch. No, Naruto wasn't on the same level as Tsunade or Sakura, but he was a powerhouse. This is taking too long, was the Jounin's thought as he ducked underneath a synchronized pair of punches and stabbed his attackers in the thighs, making them pop. Naruto is out there somewhere making more clones every time I destroy some, and him getting tired has forced me into his kind of fight, a test of stamina. Steel glinted in Kakashi's eyes. Well, we're not ones to play by the rules, Abito. The Jounin launched himself high into the air, rotating to face the ground as his hands flying through the seals. Katen. Kakaku no Jutsu, he pinched his fingers in front of his lips and blew. The clearing became hell on earth. Kakashi let the flames trickle off as he reached the apex of his jump. It looked like he'd gotten most of the clones, the only survivors being the ones that had ducked behind trees at the edge of the clearing. His feeling of satisfaction was cut off by 2 whispered words. "Hey, Kakashi-sensei." His Sharingan widened and he twisted around in the air. There, behind him, was Sakura. The real Sakura. How'd he know? Well, the fact that the girl had just ripped a tree out of the ground and was about to use it like a club was a bit of a clue. The tree came down fast. Kakashi didn't even get a chance to substitute out before getting caught in the limbs. Thankfully, he was able to substitute out with a pre-prepared log before he hit the dirt. Hitting the ground at that speed with a tree on top of you would not been fun. Unfortunately, the log he replaced himself with was at the edges of his range, and the moment the Jounin's feet touched dirt, he staggered. He immediately caught himself and straightened, but it had happened. "I've been using a lot of chakra-intensive jutsu, haven't I?" His gloved hand came up and tugged his hit eye back down over his eye. "I'll have to be careful and pace myself, air starting to wear me down." His nose twitched and his visible eye widened. "They've found me already." Kakashi turned towards the smell to find a fully armored blonde thundering towards him in absolute silence. Even he felt a little intimidated by that, but it didn't stop him from bringing his arms up in a basic defensive stance. 10 feet away from him, Naruto launched himself into the air, hurtling like a missile towards Kakashi. I can handle." One blonde turned into 40 mid-air. Oshi. The Jounin's reflexes kicked in, Naruto's were smacked out of the sky like flies. But there were a lot of them, damn it. One hit him hard, knocking the wind out of him, immediately followed by another, then a third and fourth. Within seconds the masked Jounin was on the dirt, covered in Naruto's. A blonde for every limb, 3 for his torso, and another covering his head. Well, okay, that cold been worse. All I've got to do is make a snarky comment and switch out with one of the claw weight. Naruto's chest isn't that softish at the switch it with Saku. The copy nin didn't get to finish his thought before a medical jutsu knocked him out. Sakura couldn't help but smile warmly at her teammate. They'd passed Kakashi-sensei's test fair and square this time. Together. And if she was honest with herself, it had mostly been due to Naruto. Even if it didn't look like it right now, the blonde had been the one to take point in every skirmish with sensei, leading the fight, making the plans, setting up the openings. Sakura had been surprised, pleasantly so, at the seriousness which had taken the test. During one of their impromptu planning sessions, Naruto had given her his assessment of their sensei. Better at taijutsu than fuzzy brows, nearly as good a planner as Shikamaru, better sense of smell than Kiba, fastest ninjutsu I've ever seen, and that damn Sharingan to top it all off. Heh, Kakashi-sensei's a beast alright. Well, Naruto Sakura couldn't help but smile wider as she watched her friend. If Kakashi-sensei's a beast, you're a monster. The only member of the old rookie 9 that beats you in taijutsu is Lee, you're almost as fast as he is with his weights on, and you match him in brute strength. You haven't shown a lot of techniques, but the ones you know, you really know. And your kenjutsu is better than some of the Anbu I know. She made a quick check of the prone form of Kakashi beside her to make sure he was recovering properly before returning to her musing. Your own tracking abilities are nothing to scoff at, your sense of hearing, sight, and smell are better than a normal human's. Your clones are so tough that you have to really hit them to make them dispel, and your stamina is as crazy as ever. That you might not plan out every step like Shikamaru, but your overall plans are good and still leave leeway for your trademark unpredictability. The blonde's plans had gone something like this. Okay, let's push him into the clearing so I can spam Cage Bunshin for a bit and tire him out. I'll come at him from the front with a pair of clones while I send another clone at him from behind. The flanking clone's gonna attack him with fire, Kakashi-sensei'll probably block it with a quick water or earth wall before throwing a really big attack jutsu at the assault team. When he does, the clonus'll grab you and drop to the dirt and protect you. I want you to use that as a cover to switch out with the flanking clone and attack sensei from behind. Now, I don't expect you to hit him, but try to force him towards the clearing. Sakura had of course asked, and after that. Ted grinned at her, sending a pleasant tingle up her spine. Well, we'll figure that out when we get there. When Shed stopped to think about it, Sakura had almost been scared. Scared that the boy she'd known, hyperactive, naive, eager to please, and a bit of a knucklehead, no longer existed. That the guy who'd asked her out every day, usually several times for so long, had been completely replaced by this serious young man. Then had taken a bell of Kakashi's belt and started doing this little dance that made her laugh. He was still doing it actually. It was still the Naruto she knew, just grown up. A small, affectionate sigh escaped her before she could stifle it, an embarrassed blush spreading across her face as she checked to make sure Naruto hadn't noticed. Thankfully, he hadn't. Ah. Now I'm mooning over Naruto of all people. Sakura berated herself as she forced herself to check over Kakashi once again, making sure the older man hadn't been unduly hurt by a suddenly induced change in his brainwaves. Inner Sakura had to add her to Ryo, even though his butt looks real nice in those pants, and that chest plate. Talk about a chest plate. You can't get much more form-fitting than that. The mental figure started to drool unabashedly. Sakura's eyebrow twitched in irritation at the stray thought, so? It's Naruto, has still a bit of a blockhead, and a pervert. A quick glance confirmed that the object of her thoughts was still doing his victory dance, and had been for the past 30 minutes, not to mention Hess doing the stupidest dance. The dance that does such wonderfully yummy things to his hips. And talk about stamina. Roar. Betty could go on and on all nig. The voice in her head was promptly silenced with the mental equivalent of a roundhouse kick. Nah. Sakura-chan, any idea when Kakashi-sensei's going to wake up? I wanna rub this in his mask a bit before the warm fuzzies go away to Bayo. Sakura's eyebrow began twitching again as she growled, Naruto. What? The blonde squatted down on the other side of Kakashi and gave her a grin. You know you want to do it too. She huffed when he waggled his eyebrows at her suggestively. No, I don't know. Yes you do. Oh. Same Naruto, alright. Sakura shook her fist at the blonde and drew out every syllable of his name with as much warning as she could muster. Naruto. Then Naruto's expression changed a bit. He became a bit more serious instead of teasing, leaning in a bit closer, his blue eyes boring into her own as he whispered, Sakura-chan, it's not right to deny your feelings like that. Not really acting on them is okay, but don't deny they exist. The Kunoichi stopped in place, her fist still hanging in the air as she said his name again, unable to identify the emotion that she put into it, Naruto. For a moment, she just stared at the serious and yet slightly smiling boy, no young man, that was across from her. In that instant, she could truly see him as the Hokage. Then he gave her one of his sillier grins, and the spell was broken. All those repressed urges can't be good for you. You might just, explode from sexual frustration or something to Bayo. Ah. Naruto. Sakura smacked the chuckling blonde upside the head pretty hard, but they both could read the subtext. I missed you, Sakura. I missed you too, Naruto. Naruto sat quietly beside the prone form of his sensei, content with the world as it was. Had beaten his sensei in a fair fight, no tricks, no gimmicks, no Kyuubi, no minions. Just him and Sakura-chan. It was an amazing feeling. Had been tempted to try and perform the 1,000 years of death on his old sensei, but he wanted to show that he could be serious today. Besides, Naruto knew he'd get another chance. Either that or make one. Naruto grinned at the thought. At least until another voice broke into his thoughts, literally sire. Yanarl, what is it? Naruto wasn't angry per se, just unhappy to have his pleasant musings interrupted. Well, I'm curious as to why you did not summon the minions to aid you. Naruto schooled his external expression to keep from worrying Sakura, but he let his irritation shine through his thoughts to Gnarl. I've told you this before, Gnarl. I will not use the power of the Kyuubi on allies, it's far too likely that it'll get too into the fight and actually hurt them. Having to order people around had gradually changed Naruto more than almost anything else. The only thing that beat that was Gnarl's insistence that the boy think before he acted. Naruto had never been able to interact with people on a regular basis. In Konoha, had been socially isolated to the point that he was actually in the process of developing mental problems, and traveling with Jiraiya, had oftentimes left a place before having to really feel the consequences of his actions. And had never had the slightest experience with commanding others. The minions might been slavishly loyal, slightly sadistic, and dumber than a sack of particularly dull hammers, but they had personalities and minds of their own. It took a stern hand to rule them, and that stern hand extended to Gnarl as well. It might been amusing to see his minions run around with pumpkins for hats, but people tended to have issues when they ran around with a gutted lamb as a helmet. So, firm hand. I don't understand, sire, how does not using the Nine Tails power relate to not summoning your minions? Naruto frowned momentarily before he caught himself, had thought Gnarl was smarter than that. Gnarl, I won't use the Kyuubi's power because it's too dangerous and minions have very little self-control. If I empowered them enough to be a threat to Kakashi-sensei, they'd do their best to kill him, and I'm not willing to take that risk just to speed up a fight. Besides, the corner of the blonde's mouth twitched upwards just a hint, it's good training to push myself every once in a while. Naruto paused in his thoughts for a moment before adding, and I'd rather you didn't contact me again during these first few days. I just want to enjoy meeting my friends again and savor being home for a while, no overlording and stuff till then, K. I understand, sire, the tone to the minion master's word said he did, but he didn't like it. Well, that won't do. Yes, Gnarl. There was a pause on the other end. Yes, sire. If you ever suggest that I use lethal force against allies again, I will lock you inside Martis Pool for a month. Fair warning and all that to Bayo. That's sure thing, sire, I'll endeavor to keep that in mind. The mental connection was cut abruptly, making the corners of Naruto's mouth twitch again. There wasn't much that scared minions, they actually revered minions that had died in creative ways in the name of their overlord. But they wanted to die in service of their overlord, or not at all. No minion has ever died of old age, Gnarl himself has actually lost track of the years, so most minions died either working on their lord's projects, like redesigning the netherworld, or in battle. But to have their soul forced into the pool of the dead without dying for their overlord. That absolutely terrified them. More so than the Kyuubi terrified Konoha. It might take entire villages worth of life force to bring the ancient minion master back from the pool after had been shoved in there, but Naruto would, could, and had done it before to make his point. Naruto would not tolerate the minion's sadistic tendencies where allies were involved. But enough of these darker thoughts. Naruto wasn't Sasuke or anything to Bayo. So, what was it that had made him so content before that conversation again? Beating the snot out of sensei, good times, good times. Gnarl was happy that Naruto's darker side was truly starting to show he really was. Had encouraged and developed it in the boy himself. But that didn't mean the boy couldn't scare him sometimes. The ancient minion gulped to himself as he shuffled down the stairs that ran along the outside of the spire. He would not willingly let himself go back to that pool like that ever again. He shook himself once to get rid of the heebie-jeebies he'd gotten remembering that place. Now, there was no way he was going to just let his overlord go unsupervised, threat or no. He just wouldn't contact the boy. The threat ran through his mind again, and Gnarl shivered. He seriously hoped those beetles would keep his mind off that. Kakashi was awake. He didn't twitch, he didn't move, he didn't do much of anything other than wake up. Then he remembered he wasn't on a mission, and it had just been his own students that knocked him out. His students were on either side of him, probably kneeling. Well, they were quiet, there wasn't any tension in the air. They'd probably taken him aside after they'd knocked him out, talked a bit, then settled down to wait for him to get up. Taking into account Naruto's new level of maturity, that cold'd taken anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour. Hey Kakashi-sensei. Yes, Naruto. Kakashi could feel the grin directed at him, just making sure you were awake. The Jounin sighed, well, there goes my nap. You two have really become strong, huh? I'm surprised you were actually able to get the bells. PFT, of course, Kakashi-sensei. Naruto grinned at the Jounin in the growing light of the morning. You didn't think we spent the past couple years slacking off, did ya? I wouldn't be surprised if we'd even surpassed you to Bayo. Naruto. Sakura admonishingly smacked the boy's armored shoulder, though there was a small smile on her face. Don't be conceited. Kakashi chuckled, smiling at his charges and shaking his head a bit, but anyway, I'm still young. He did not hear that disbelieving snort from Naruto, he didn't, and I've recently developed a brilliant new jutsu. The jounin was cut off by a particularly eloquent grumble from Naruto's stomach. Ah. I almost forgot. I've barely done anything on my list. The blonde boy grabbed the sides of his head. Crap. I haven't even gone to Ichiraku Ramen. Or home, but I haven't gone to old man Tucha's place yet. Damn. Sakura actually considered that a moment, yeah, I'm a bit hungry myself from the exercise yesterday. Kakashi couldn't help the sigh that escaped him. Back then, they'd react to every little thing. They were cute back then. Naruto snickered and whispered conspiratorially to Sakura, right. It'll be Kakashi-sensei's treat. The girl couldn't help but grin devilishly, alright sensei. However, the masked man had different ideas. Sorry, I have to create and submit a list of formations of the new teams, so it's goodbye for now, Jana. And then he was gone. Ah. Bastard ran away, Naruto huffed, crossing his arms over his chest. He honestly should've seen that coming when Head volunteered the man to pay. Lazy bastard was pretty good at running away. Sakura HM saying something like that, Hess just trying to read that book more probably. Something dawned on Naruto. Heh, well, since it's just us, you still want to go? The girl shrugged, sure. Naruto beamed at her, then it's a dat. They are paying. He blinked before shrugging himself, sure, it'll be nice to catch up with things to Bayo. The teen pulled his frog wallet out of his pocket, checking to be sure he still had enough on him. It was about then when Sakura recognized a pair of faces in the crowd and called out excitedly, Shikamaru. Temari-san. Hey, who do you think this is? The pinkette gestured at the taller boy beside her. It took a moment for Shikamaru to put a name to the face on top of the body of a samurai, but once he did a smile spread across his face. Hey. If it isn't Naruto. Naruto barked out a short laugh. Ha. Shikamaru. I missed you, man. As the two pairs of shinobi approached one another, the blondes glanced at each other. Thember's analytical mind performed an automatic threat assessment. 170 centimeters. Built for power. High-quality samurai armor, weak points in armor. Head, inner bicep, eyes, groin, feet. Udachi, 150 centimeters blade, 35 centimeters handle. Walks like a close combat specialist, probably knows how to use his fists and the sword. Ally. Relaxing marginally, Temari actually looked at the other blonde in mild surprise. Kid had been a midget before, now he had 5 or so centimeters on her. When Shed last saw him, had just been a punk playing ninja, beating Gaara aside, had been a joke now. Now he looked like a serious shinobi. The two groups stopped a couple feet from each other, and at this distance Temari could feel the chakra being dumped into the armor in insane amounts. The young man's eyes flicked up and down Temari once, cool and analytical. The hairs on the back of her neck stood on end as she was examined, then the feeling passed as his eyes flicked over her again, this time warm and appraising. The once-over young man gave an attractive woman, and the Suna Kunoichi could feel her cheeks warm just a bit. This entire exchange lasted about 2 seconds. Did you just get back? Nah, Naruto laced his fingers behind his head and smiled at Shikamaru. I only got back yesterday though. So, still an idiot or have you managed to change? Shikamaru smirked at the blonde, expecting an explosive answer. He didn't get one, instead, Naruto smiled warmly at him. I like to think I've grown up at least a little, nah. He shrugged some, his eyes closing as he smiled even wider, but I've tried to keep a bit of my idiocy. People always underestimate idiots, no. One of Shikamaru's eyebrows went up and he glanced over at Sakura for confirmation. The girl just smiled a bit, he actually hasn't been all that bad since Hess arrived, she shrugged, no idea how long that's going to last though. Hey. Sakura Chayan. Naruto pouted at the girl, earning smiles from the others before he shook his head and turned to Shikamaru. What about you, Shika? You stopped being lazy yet? No. Naruto chuckled and turned to Temari. You aren't bothered that Hess like this? She raised a brow at him. Why would I be? There was just a hint of accusation in her voice.